Juggling, yes.
Wondering.
I can juggle. Well, not even
Maybe
one.
so. A little bit of time.
But it might be a kind of a comedy like thing.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna turn it so you can talk into it, okay?
Sure.
I really need you guys to talk into it.
Do we go like this when we talk and cover our mouth?
Yeah.
Whoa.
I like it. Laying down the law.
Wait till we're off video. Just saying, Paula.
Intermission.
Man, oh man, there's a lot
Intermission.
of stuff in the city council. They're having discussions and you on the YouTube like rebroadcast and it's like, I don't really think you want that on there. You
I-
should like.
People don't realize they can hear it. It's really good.
Hi, Jill.
Yeah, how about you, man?
Did.
Okay, so.
I did not realize that Andrew was coming to the military too. I thought he had maybe talked about it.
He was talking about it and then he's like, no, I'll go to CGCC. And I was like, right.
That's right.
Evening, Kristen.
Withdrew. It's like, Dad, I'm trying to like,
Things are things.
Things are things.
All right.
Truer word was never spoken.
What do you
Still
mean?
feel
sworn
like,
today.
I'll keep
When
like,
did you-
oh, did I read my pen?
3 weeks.
Okay, though. How about you?
It's not my responsibility.
Ups and down, but mostly right in the middle.
hey, like,
We're all treading water in some ways.
Indeed.
start knocking down walls. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like they're gonna come back.
Gonna-
Yeah, you should create a sugar.
You're dying
My
to do it.
office is in
Not
like
at
the
all.
smallest
Ready?
house
I mean, I think I'm gonna stay. Sorting out
in
all
the,
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
the smallest bedroom in the house. I should like,
Oh, yeah.
Hey, where are you going?
Great.
Oh, I'm getting shuffled.
You want to be right in the middle of the
She's
camera?
gonna give you a microphone.
I'm gonna
All
give
right.
you this book in case you need something.
No.
Fire weather.
That's cool.
Yeah.
hey, I'm
Everybody thinks that these fires haven't been
live and kicking.
something that people knew was coming. Need to read that book. They knew it was coming a long time ago.
Stand.
Thanks.
That what it's.
Mostly about a fire up in Canada, but
Yeah.
it's talking about the conditions that are gonna causing cities to burn.
Yeah.
That was in the spring in Canada. This one burned up, you know, kind of like really way north up in Alberta. But almost all have a
Yeah.
wind power lines.
So from the west side, same thing, right?
Yeah, power lines, you know. Reading it, there's some limitations on fire suppression systems.
Which I follow religiously.
Fire
All right, it's 5:30, so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the Columbia Gateway Urban Renewal Agency Board on January 21st, 2025 to order. Paula, will you please call the roll?
Stacy Coburn,
Here.
Walter Denstadt,
Here.
Scott Hagee,
Here.
Kristen Lilvick.
Here.
Darcy Long,
Here.
Tim McLaughlin is absent, Dan Richardson,
Present.
Chris Swift,
Here.
Ben Ring.
Here.
Thank you. All right, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance if you can. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next we have the approval of the agenda. Any changes or you guys know? Okay. I'll take a motion.
Move to approve the agenda as proposed.
I'll second.
So it's been moved by Hagee and seconded by Ben, right? To approve the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Okay, so next on the agenda, we have our election of officers. And just for clarification for anyone who's wondering, on last Monday, the mayor appointed me as the representative for the city, and I'm downtown. I can't even talk now. And Ben as the city council representative. So essentially, we're just flip-flopping titles here. Okay, so we need to have an election for a chair and a vice chair. I am willing to continue serving as chair, but if someone else is interested, I can say so.
I would move to approve Darcy or nominate Darcy as the chair of Urban Renewal.
I'll second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Are there any other nominations? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we have the election of our vice chair, and I would like to nominate Dan Richardson.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other nominations? Are you?
I did.
Okay, all in favor of Dan Richardson as the vice chair, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Abstained. Okay, congratulations. Next, we have the approval of the December 17th, 2024 minutes. Any questions, comments, or clarifications? Okay, if there are none, I will take a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
To approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Rain, seconded by Richardson. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Great, motion passes. Next, we'll have our public comment. During this portion of the meeting, anyone may speak on any urban renewal subject. 5 minutes per person will be allowed. Do you have anyone in the audience or online? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go on to our discussion item, item number 8. Property Rehabilitation Program, the proposed modifications, and this is a discussion item.
Thank you, Chair. Dan Spots, Economic Development Officer for the city, and express appreciation to County Assessor Jill Amory for attending.
Hi, Chair Long.
Yes.
Hi, it's Jonathan. I don't believe Mr. Spots' microphone is on.
Oh, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Jonathan. Josh has just corrected that issue. Dan Spots, Economic Development Officer with the city. Appreciation to Jill Amory, the County Assessor for attending tonight. Some of the discussion will touch upon that, and we will be probably proposing some modifications to some of the language that we presented in the staff report. It's not going to be quite as easy as we talk about in the staff report in terms of ROI in particular. But first of all, as you know, the substantial amendment has been approved, expanding spending authority for the agency. The referendum petition deadline was January 8th. We had no petition filed. So at this point, we are prepared to proceed with making appropriate investments in the district with the goal of spending as wisely, investing as wisely as we can. The 6.1 additional plus the balance of 2.2 that we had going into this, 2.2 million plus 6.1 million. Again, with the district terminating in 2029, how do we make those investments? What is the best strategy for doing so? So the staff report talks about two different elements, the incentive program and development funding agreements, both under property rehabilitation umbrella. I'd like to go through, we talked about this in December, and I'd like to go through some changes that we've made to what we presented in December and get a temperature read from you on that with the goal of coming back in February with a final version. So I'd like to go through point by point on some of the proposed changes and emphasis on the word proposed. This is discussion. So starting on page 2, just a reminder of what we have at present. Commercial grants up to $50,000 each with a 50% match. Mixed use, $150,000 with a 30% match, only eligible for projects that include the development of at least one new housing unit, more than 50 units eligible for additional funding. And then new residential, up to $10,000 system development charge payments per unit of housing upon building permit issuance. And that up to $10,000 covering the city's SDCs and also the Parks District SDCs. So going below that, proposed modifications, I wanted to point out that we have a lot of target numbers in here, percentage values, percentages of owner participation in grants, matches, things like that, again, for discussion purposes. So, you know, we definitely don't want to set anything in stone at this discussion. But anyway, first off, the idea of combining the commercial and mixed use programs into a single grant. So the cap would be 200,000 with a 30% match. Again, the current policy is 50% is 50,000 for commercial, 150,000 for mixed use. This reflects feedback we've had from business owners, building owners. We need less complexity and a bigger impact. So we're trying to basically simplify the process and have something that would fit more without that requirement for housing. So this can be a larger commercial development without the need for a new housing unit. Doesn't mean that we are not continuing to emphasize housing. We want to do that by continuing the SDC reimbursement, but we want more flexibility in this commercial grant element. Administrative approval for requests up to 50,000.
And you might want to put the microphone over.
Oh, sorry about that. Administrative approval for requests of up to 50,000. We had suggested a higher ceiling last time, and the board wishes to have that ability to have oversight. So we are keeping that at 50,000 as it has been the case. Board approval required for requests of 51 to 200,000 with a basic ROI requirement. And here is where I'm glad that Jill is attending, County Assessor Jill Amory. In your staff report, basic ROI required for requests of 51,000 or more per the assessor's estimate of improved value. Example, a property owner proposes a $100,000 renovation. Staff would confer with the assessor to obtain estimated post-renovation value of the property. Project should be no less than 5% of the property's taxable value in the tax year following project completion. Easier said than done. The challenge being the different variables and certainly the issue of saying a property shall increase in value because of urban renewal investment as opposed to a property may increase in value because of urban renewal investment. In discussions with Assessor Amory last week, the preference definitely is going to be on may rather than shall. And we do reference ROI at several other points in this process, both on the incentive program and on the development funding agreement. And the same challenge is going to apply. We can go through the process on large agreements as we did with Basalt Commons. There's still some uncertainty, I think, involved, but certainly on smaller projects, it's going to be more challenging. Jill, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add in terms of background perspective on this.
Please.
For those of you that may not know me, I'm Jill Amory, your assessor and tax collector for Wasco County. I think I know Commissioner Hagee and I had a brief conversation about the complexities of ROI. And I think one question I have is, what is it that you want to measure? Now, I see things so differently from my perspective. And when you talk about ROI, and if we need to do this more offline, I'm happy to do that. But I do have a few questions, which would be define ROI. What are you trying to measure? I think that might help give some guidance to staff here. And it references in that agreement a lot that they're going to confer with the assessor. I don't know how to say this as nicely as possible. It's not really my role. And it becomes very complex and it's case by case. And there are so many complexities that happen with my giving a value. I hold both a private license and a state license. If I provide an estimate to Mr. Spots, that means I've just done an appraisal and I'm bound by that value. So it makes it very complex in conferring with the assessor or any of my appraisers. Same scenario. So I'd like to help, if I could, sort of get to what it is that you're defining as ROI and what is it you're trying to measure. And that might, again, help provide some guidance.
You want to weigh in?
Well, so when we have talked about it before, it's kind of like how many years does it take to get in return property taxes that will cover whatever our investment is? So if we invest $100,000 in a project, theoretically the value goes up and more property taxes are paid, and we will recoup that $100,000 investment in how many years?
So that starts with a complexity. Are we increasing the real market value or the assessed value?
Well, and I mean, to me, it has to do with property taxes. It doesn't, the real market value, we've had discussion, but I mean, it's really
Yeah.
about property taxes that are coming back to the entities.
Yeah. And I know you know that, Scott, but I kind of want to get that out there because it is a distinction. And this is where it gets difficult. It's why our job is so difficult. There's general ongoing repair and maintenance. You could invest $100,000 and none of that would go to the assessed value, which we call an exception event. So it's really hard to answer that question. And that's what I wanted to be able to talk about a little bit and help you understand. It's really difficult. It's case by case. You could invest 40,000 in another property and it would go straight to the assessed value. And then you could calculate that return. There again, it's not a direct 1-for-1. We have to apply the changed property ratio, and that is the addition that goes to the maximum assessed value. I know I'm going to make your eyes roll back in your head, and I'm trying really hard not to. But that's how complex it is in trying to determine, is it going to the assessed value, which means the taxable value? And that's where I actually have a couple of suggestions for changes, because there could be a partial exemption, and the AV and the TAV are two different things. And so I want to make sure we're capturing that right line item in there. It just is never ending in the complexities. And so, again, being able to try and help provide some guidance as to what is that measurable number that you're looking for and how do you capture that, because it is so different from case to case. A new property is easy. Basalt Commons, it's definitely going to increase the tax base. Another property downtown where you might invest $100,000, it may not change it at all. It might increase the real market value a little bit, but that's not going to affect your tax return at all.
No, let me, if I may,
Yes.
throw out a couple of examples too, and that's an appreciate your offer in helping us fine tune this
Right.
thing. I'll learn eventually. Appreciate your offer in helping us refine this. One example that's come to mind is a facade renovation. Say a major downtown business wants to completely redo its really dated, outmoded facade, but the facade is about the only thing that's going to be done. It's one example. Another example that we're going to be talking about a little bit later here, roof repair replacement. We used to do that. We're not doing it now. We're coming back tonight with the idea that roof repair and replacement would be allowed if it constitutes at least 50% of an overall renovation project. So roof repair and replacement, immediately I think of repair and maintenance. Okay, that's not going to do anything. But if it's part of a larger renovation project, then would that do something? How would that play into the mix?
Possibly.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Again, it's so individual. If they're doing a full upgrade, likely. If they're just doing more general ongoing repair and maintenance, probably not.
Say that we would further, and I don't know if it's possible or not, but further define that commercial kitchen. They're adding a commercial kitchen in a business where one did not exist. They're adding a expansion, anything that is not repair and replacement. And actually, we do, even our existing guidelines, we don't replace like for like, for instance. If it's not replacing an HVAC, but installing a new HVAC, that replaces an earlier system, then that would be that's something we can allow under our current guidelines. Does that constitute an improvement? Maybe,
Possibly.
possibly.
Yeah, where it gets interesting in doing updates, if the current product is no longer available and you upgrade to the closest available new product, then no, general ongoing repair and maintenance. But if you've had, say, wall heating and you decide to go with a geothermal heating and cooling unit, yes, then it would be.
Okay.
And you just, and this is where it gets really difficult for Dan and Josh, is you just can't put that all into the guidelines, right? It's so much appraiser judgment on, is it ongoing maintenance? Is it an exception event?
Also recognizing your time saying we have 10 projects coming down, I would not want to go and say, Joe, what do you think of this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one? I don't think you would.
Much as and I hope the sentiment comes across, as much as we want to help our capacity, it's very difficult to be available for that in a timely manner.
Yeah, and I think it touches on, when we adopted the incentive program, the idea was to streamline a process. And here we have a couple examples where we could get log jammed early on, worked with you and Melanie on just a few. I mean, I think the first 3 incentive program projects that we had, and we were really trying to find out what that return was going to be. And it was, multiple conversations back and forth to really try to nail that down. So I think there's the potential avenue of the agency committing to a set amount that ROI is not something that we are looking at. Facade improvements, that 50,000 or less, like we put in here, there's no ROI involved. If we start to look at those, higher dollar sign investments, then maybe that is something that we do require that the applicant provides that additional information. We can evaluate it from there. But I wonder if in this conversation, if there's a threshold that the agency is comfortable with making investments on when we will not know potentially what that return on investment is going to be.
I think it's really good that we've got this discussion on the record, because the public, we're as confused and they're going to be even more confused than we are. But I think when we were talking about return on investment, what we were really trying to do is make sure that we were not investing in things that really didn't improve downtown, didn't meet the requirements of urban renewal. Because a few times we've invested in nonprofits who then, of course, aren't on the tax rolls at all. And so even though I think it was well-intentioned to say what's the, okay, even though it's good to say what's the ROI, I think what we're really trying to do is just have the board be able to understand generally what this is going to bring to downtown. And we've talked about this a number of times, that sometimes you can invest in a project that will actually do something that you can't measure. Like, it inspires more people to come downtown and be at the other businesses and all of those things. So, thoughts from the board, but I think what we're finding out is this is just too complex, especially for just a short amount of years that we have left. And what we're really just trying to do is make sure that we're making good decisions, which I think that this board has been doing. And so maybe if there's a different way to word that or something, just to make it clear, because I think trying to fish around and suss out what is going to be true return on investment as far as taxable purposes is just almost impossible with Oregon's tax system.
Certainly our intent is not to abandon the idea of ROI, but
No.
to try to find that threshold. And maybe the threshold is focused on the DFAs, development funding agreements, the big ones that come down, which they're not going to be that many of those. What we anticipate are the 50s, the 150s, the 200s. And they're definitely are those in the wings right now.
Can I add one of the things that we talked about last week? I know I've sat on some boards of a revolving loan fund. Even if I'm going for a small investment, I'm going to have a financing package together. And that's something that I suggested maybe they could provide. And that would help some. If they're larger, they're actually going to have an appraisal done. if they, I know some of the boards I sat on, they would have to go to traditional financing first and be turned down in order to access these other funds. So they might have those documents available and they might be willing to provide them, or you might suggest that those are required. And then that could possibly give more financial data and possibly an appraisal, which then, is an easy thing for me to take a look with them and provide some guidance if that documentation is available.
Good point, Jill.
Scott Higgy.
I just, I'm thinking back to the Basalt Commons work that you all did, somebody did. And it was interesting because it wasn't just about property taxes, it was about other elements, like if there's people downtown, what's the, income that they'll generate over time. That was, to me, that to me made a really great case for, the investment of a significant amount of money into that project. So, that's what I'm hoping, whatever it is really is like the case for making these investments that we can with a straight face go, that makes sense. Versus like, we have no idea, we're, hoping a dream that, the project even gets done or something like that.
Well, I'm all about increasing the tax base. Some of the projects that I haven't voted for, nobody was arguing that it would. Everybody knew that it wasn't going to increase the tax base. I don't think it's that hard to tell which ones have a good chance of actually increasing the value. We're not going to do a full-blown assessment or thing, but you can kind of imagine, put this much money into a building, it's likely going to be worth more. So I'm not super worried about pinning it down to a number. But if, like I said, may increase the value, that's fine with me. This group of people, I think, needs to hear what the project is, and each person to kind of assess whether they think that's actually going to wind up being a good return on investment or not. And maybe there'll be some different opinions. I was reading a little bit in there, and it's not 100% clear to me on the fire suppression stuff. There was something about they could combine the re-roofing and the fire suppression stuff together in some cases or something. And I just need to say that I'm all for spending lots of money on fire suppression stuff. You're not going to get me to vote no on anything. And the thing of it is a lot of the buildings we're talking about in urban renewal area, to me, are high risk for having a fire that's not just going to destroy that business, but several businesses and sometimes entire blocks. So if you want to preserve this urban renewal area and not have it look like the Malibu Strip, you're going to need to invest money in fire suppression. So I'm all for, even if it's replacement, if it's upgrade. And if these buildings catch on fire, there's going to be people I know that are putting their lives at risk. So I don't want them to catch on fire.
So one of the things that I've been thinking about is, and I think we touched on this previously, or maybe I'm just not remembering, but at some point last year, we talked about some sort of point system, right? And I think when it comes to assessed value and things like that, that's a pretty tough hill to climb. But if you can do it, and if you can show that there is some, bringing up the Basalt Commons effort and whatnot, that's a much more easy example of return on investment as far as assessed value. But I think if we go through like our goals for urban renewal, develop a point system for lower dollar amount things, that are like the $200,000 or less price tag. And, the more of those goals you check off the box, some of them might be weighted, right? If you can prove that you have some sort of return on investment from assessed value over a period of time, maybe that's weighed higher than, I think Walt's example of like a fire suppression system is great. you know, maybe it's not a new development, but it's an improvement to an existing building, and it checks a lot of the goals off, you know, things that we would like to see, that we've already identified. You know, if it was a residential, you know, it might bump it up. I don't know how to weigh that, but that's kind of like where my thought process is heading for the lower dollar amount things that, like, risk versus reward comes to mind, right? Like, we don't want to spend a lot of time for somebody that just needs like a $30,000 effort done. So I don't know. That's where that's where I've been heading down as I was reviewing stuff going into this meeting, was how do we develop some sort of like point value to it so we can prioritize projects and see how they line up. The return on investment is going to be hard, I think. Just one suggestion to think about.
Anyone else? Before you move on, one thing I will say, I understand the desire to do the point system. I would sort of be the devil's advocate there and say we have some things that are confidential right now. We're looking at a couple proposals. It was really hard to do it by scoring because points are subjective and you don't really know what one person's points mean to the other. And I've also had that same thing when we're evaluating staff or something. And so I would prefer to have us continue just having the discussion and refining things together and then saying whether we can live with the project or not, up or down. But those are 2 points of view for the board to consider.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if you were to use some sort of a points value assessment, I think there's some key points that you could dial in based on the goals of urban renewal that make that measurable, objective target to rate a project on. It's not this, I think it's different from return on investment necessarily, right? Like, if we could prove that, if a business owner in the district could come in and say that they were going to increase one of the three ways that the city's funded, right? Property taxes, franchise fees, and TRT dollars. If it was a significant increase in either one of those three check boxes, I think that, you know, you could probably easily come up with a financial return on investment for downtown, but that's going to be really hard. I think that's why I was thinking if we can come up with objective goals based on or objective scoring system based on the goals that urban renewal has, I think it would be could be telling. I don't know.
Thoughts?
I like that. I think we tossed around points in the previous staff report. And ironically, in doing historic research, about 15 years ago, we had a point system and we dropped it for some reason.
Oh, okay.
But awarding according to the goals, because we have a number of goals and objectives, and we've gone over those in quite detail. And that was part of the substantial amendment, actually, was adopting those goals. So they're quite fresh. Checking those off, this meets 5 of the 10 goals. This meets 8 of the 10 goals. However many goals, I can't remember right now.
Yeah, something like that.
Something more straightforward and perhaps less subjective than to Chair Long's point about points being subjective. I've been on, as you probably all have been, review committees on RFPs and things like that. Okay, is this a 20 point? Did they knock it out of the park? No, I don't like the way his hair looked. It's a 1 point. You know, it's just, so.
But if it's a series of sort of yes, no, if it's binary and you have a long enough list, you can
Could be.
hopefully make it an objective and replicable system that's not based on how someone's feeling at the moment. And I think that's really what we're trying to get at, right? It's some sort of coherent or logical framework that is straightforward for you to apply, not particularly burdensome for you to apply, but gives us some sort of reason for defense or reason for logic for having supported something.
Yeah, I think we can definitely explore the point system. I would definitely want to figure out where we want to apply that. For the lower end, just kind of a reminder to the board, in 2022, when we first adopted the incentive program, we kind of had some, lack of a better term, kind of loosey-goosey language. And we came back to the board to refine that language so we could be very clear when an individual is looking at an application form, they can look down a list and see eligible, what's ineligible. Before that, it was a project that will benefit the downtown in a, just kind of more loose subjective language. So at least how this incentive program currently works, if you have a project that's listed, you can be funded. But a point system, we could consider it for the current incentive program. We could add to it. But if we were to do a point system, I would say we may want to apply it to the higher points.
Correct.
I mean, to like higher dollar projects.
Yeah, and one thing about as Jill provided to us, one thing, an individual is going to bring in a financing package that could potentially bring in an appraisal. I think that makes sure that the individual that's coming in is bringing some skin to the game. In all honesty, I mean, it's not just coming forward, having staff go through this process, provide all this information for these larger funding requests. We know for sure when they're going to that stage, we know that the project is very serious and can move to the next level. Otherwise, I think by not providing that in any form does raise this ROI question. It raises how much, like, I guess, go back to skin in the game on the project itself.
I think that's a great point. One of the questions that I was just writing down to myself is at what sort of threshold do we trigger something like that, right? If it was the 50,000 or less, that staff would have, discretion to award or not award without coming to the board. I think that definitely, like, we don't need something like that necessarily, right? But I'm also, and I don't think that we can answer this question tonight, but I'd be curious to know what did not work with a previous point-based system on urban renewal. Like, is there anything we could take away? Was it the way that it was designed? Was it just the system, like, just as a whole? I don't know if there's anything to glean from that. But
I'd have to go into a lot of minute research because I've just found the reference in an earlier document. But it seemed to be quite detailed and perhaps a little too rigid. I like the idea of saying for the 51,000 to 200,000, yes, this meets these goals. This meets 5 goals. This meets 7 goals. That gives all of you some guidance as to which, whether it, not points per se, but how many goals does it meet. DFA's points, and come up with something that we can apply. Josh, what do you
Still think we're making it unnecessarily complicated because I've been on urban renewal for 8 years. There's not been a point system at any point during that time. And we have never come to a point where we have needed that in order to move forward that I can think of. I know there are other people that have been on the board that long. I think we're just adding more work and complexity, and I like having the discussion out in public rather than just assigning it numbers. Like, that's why we're a board and we're independent, is so that we can bring our own thoughts and ideas to it and work it out. It seems like you used to call it something else, but by the time you get to a DFA, we're usually trying to work with whoever it is and we're giving them feedback so that we can accomplish that. And so it's not really we'll bring it to us like a bank and we'll say yes or no. We're like, okay, is this a good idea? We like it for these things. We need you to change that. And so I feel like it's more of an ebb and flow with our downtown and more of a partnership than not a rubber stamp, but yes, no judgment. So I just want to keep it simple because there was a time when it was tough and staff comes and goes, and I know you'll make an announcement later, but you don't always have the same people in the role. So
We're all for keeping it simple too. Okay. How about if I continue to go through we'll see what are the thoughts.
Can
Um,
I ask before Jill, I don't know, Jill, if you're gonna sneak out here. I'm wondering, is there anything you can just give us in generalities, like just some really basic education about how the system works, what things are very solid and what things are much much more difficult to figure out? Like you said, like new projects, that investment's just rock solid for the most part.
Yeah. Shooting from the hip and putting me
Yeah.
on the spot, of course.
Yeah.
Um, if you'd be up for it, maybe next month.
Okay.
And I could bring something a little more thoughtful because
Yeah.
it is very complex and I could talk for an hour and make your eyes roll back in your head and give you 5 examples. And I don't want to do that. I would like to try and put something thoughtful, and we didn't have a lot of time from the time we met last week. I would like a little bit of time to put something thoughtful that might explain it a little bit and give you a better view.
Okay. No, I think that would be great because I think
Helpful.
everything you just talked about, if we can just have more education so we can be less subjective.
Absolutely.
And because we like, oh, well, Jill told us that makes a lot of sense and this is fuzzy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
that-
I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, that'd be great.
And I am gonna stick around. I was just trying to sort of back away
Okay.
from the table.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. I think that would be very valuable. And I appreciate your putting the time into it. Yeah, all right. So let's continue on page 9 of 22 in the staff report, roof repair replacement. Allowed as an eligible IP project as a portion of the request if the anticipated cost of such repair replacement constitutes no more than 50% of the overall project cost and occurs in conjunction with the total project. The entire project, if conducted in phases, must be completed within the time specified in the approved application. And we'll be having that deadline discussion also in the DFAs. When is this going to be done? Fire suppression allowed as an eligible exactly the same, basically the same conditions for fire suppression, 50% of the total project at least. To Walt's earlier question about combined projects, if roof repair, replacement, and fire suppression are proposed as part of the same project, the combined cost of those two components must not exceed 75% of the total project. Bearing in mind, these are percentages we're throwing out there for the sake of argument, but, is that roughly ballpark? What we want to get away from here is a building owner simply doing roof repair and fire suppression and not doing anything else with the building. We'd like to see some other intrinsic value, especially if we're talking about simply repairing a roof that should have been repaired anyway, or a fire suppression system that maybe was there but wasn't working too well. So trying to get ahead of that and make some intrinsic improvements. So, stop me, I'll keep on going here, but if these percentages look off or if there's something that should be added.
Board members feel about this. I don't want to spend money on roof repair. I think that's the responsibility of the owner of the building. But hypothetically, if everybody up and down the strip here dumped a bunch of money in their fire suppression system and it freed up some other money to improve their building, I think we're going to be way ahead. I don't think we're going to spend too much money on fire suppression. I don't know how the other board.
I don't have a sense of how much a fire suppression system costs. So when I'm looking at the percentage, I'm thinking,
It's expensive.
it's a lot. That really.
Yeah, one system I'm aware of is $90,000, and the need is very, very significant. Restaurant in town, their premiums went up $20,000 because they don't have a fire suppression system, and the cost of installing one is, I think, in their case, is well over $100,000. To roof repair, a new owner buys a building, hasn't been able to negotiate a new roof as part of the process. I know there's a situation like that, and that roof is failing. When I was on council, we did roof repair because if you don't do that, you lose the entire building. And so, yes, it should be a maintenance issue, but how many homeowners, how many businesses out there, they let the roof get by and get by and get by, and then suddenly you've got a crisis. So it's a judgment call.
Is there a way to specify, like maybe we can handle roofing within the first like several years of a person purchasing a building as opposed to it being like something that people can just tack on? Because if that is a case, like I think that would be a reasonable request. It's just more for people that have let it lapse that I think I'm hearing people saying that would be an issue. So like maybe potentially within the first 5 years of, now owning the building, that gives them time to get their feet under them and then also make necessary improvements. I don't know how anyone else would feel about that.
An interesting idea. I think the other question I have is the cost of a roof repair versus total replacement versus a fire suppression system. I bet you the roof would be cheaper. As long as it wasn't a full replacement of, I don't know.
Would you expand on that just a little bit more?
So if a fire suppression system is going to cost me a little over $100K to put in from scratch, we'll say, right? Versus, I've got a building that I purchased and, maybe they're like new to running their own business. I don't know, but like that's again not on us, but at the same time, I mean, how many times has anyone up here purchased a new home, right? So some of us have, and building inspectors are like kind of can be a significant variable in the purchase of your home, or post-purchase, I should say, right? So you find out afterwards that your building inspector missed a big checkbox for whatever reason. Now you've got to figure out how to fix it, right? So same thing happens with small business. You purchase a new building. That's why I think there's something there, like the amount of time after a new purchase, that's not necessarily on the building owner for missing it. I mean, due diligence, if it was me buying a building, I would definitely go take a look at it. But yeah, I don't know. If it was again, not a roof replacement, right? But some sort of roof repair. I don't know if we attach a value to it or something like that, but I think the time post purchase of a property that's new to somebody is interesting. It's measurable, and it's not allowing people to like sit there for 50 years or 30 years with the building and not just doing what they should. So I don't know. But again, like that roof repair, I think is what I'm suggesting is a roof repair, even on a commercial building, versus like $100,000 or $90,000 plus fire suppression system is probably going to be less, I would think.
Also, just to check my math, if we're speaking of projects that would go up to 200,000 in roof repairs, eligible to be covered at no more than half. So we know those are projects that are 100K or less.
Yeah.
Which is not nothing, but it's a useful scale to keep in mind.
Yeah, I guess the question would be if it was more than 50%, then I don't know, is there a consideration there, like the time it was purchased? It's an interesting.
It is. That to incentivize investment quickly, as opposed to paying for bills that maybe should have been covered. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
And I think I think we'd really want to define the difference between a repair and a replacement. I'll just give you, when the agency owned the Tony's building, I was working with Brown Roofing to do a repair to fix the leak, because it was known. When talking to the individual from Brown Roofing, he said he'd been with the company for 20 years and he'd been repairing the roof for 20 years. We didn't want to go through and do a full replacement. So that might be something to consider too, if we are making a repair on a roof, but depending on the application, and tar on top of tar on top of tar, water may find its way through. So it might be that really want to take a look at our investment overall if we're just putting a Band-Aid on top of something rather than some type of permanent investment onto the building.
Yeah, I'll just say, just because I've been here and we've had this discussion for years off and on. Yeah, I'm real uncomfortable with the roof situation. I mean, to me, that's a repair maintenance, and I realize there are situations that you find yourself in, but when it comes to the improvement and what we're trying to accomplish on a long-term basis, I'm not sure, to me, that fits what we're trying to accomplish. And I can get there if we have to, but it wouldn't be where I would head. If I'm going to spend my money, it's probably not where I would head first, I guess. So it's would not be at the top of my list of places I'd want to spend my money in and try to improve, put money back into the community and expected return on tax investment. So.
And then just to clarify that I'm thinking about this right, if we're saying that the roof and or sprinkler system can't be more than 50% of the entire project, and we're saying it's $90,000 to $100,000 for a sprinkler system, then what we're saying is, in order to put that sprinkler system in, you've got to have a $180,000 to $200,000 project.
Mm-hmm.
And the numbers, and we can adjust these.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trying to get the concept out here, and if it needs to be lower, then do so. Roof or sprinklers or both, maybe read from the board on that one.
Yeah, I think this is part of why I hesitate on the point system, because we've always had enough flexibility that if somebody came to us with a project and we realized after talking to them and looking at it that for that specific project that it made sense to help them pay for the roof because it would protect the rest of the request and what they were doing, we could do that. But when you write things down so specifically and narrowly, it really takes that flexibility out of what we have. And I don't know that enough of our projects are cookie cutter down here. They've all been different. I don't think we've done any two that are really the same.
Right now, we preclude roof
Yeah.
repair replacement.
I know.
So,
Dan, do you have I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you have a sense of what the pent up roof replacement demand is? Is it like everybody would knock on your door tomorrow if we said, yeah, go for it?
I know of 3 that I've been working with over the past year and a half. No, 4. Make that 4. And of those, 2, I think, would be pretty arguably a need. The other 2, I think they could probably afford to do it if they wanted to. In terms of the cost, from 40,000, Chenoweth Middle School was 1.7 million, but that's a big building. Another thing to keep in mind, potential combination of roof and sprinklers. If you're having a charged sprinkler system, you need an insulated roof. So sometimes there can be a combination between the 2. If you would be open to discussing larger, and again, the cost of a roof repair and sprinkler is probably going to kick it over 200,000 anyway on a lot of these projects, then that puts us into the DFA territory. And if we could just take out the prohibition on roofs and leave it on a case-by-case basis for larger projects, and no roof repair on IP then, but leave the door open to sprinklers.
So effectively, no roof repairs on projects $200,000 or less. And if there is a large roof repair project, they would come in front of the board and have the board make that decision on a case-by-case basis through this development funding agreement.
Sound fair? Okay.
I don't see
Cool.
anyone.
I guess I'm just speaking for myself, obviously, I don't have a huge amount of heartburn about roof repair. I guess I would like to learn more about why that would be unwise if it were unwise to put money towards that. But I feel like if it's not a huge percentage of the money we end up spending, if it's integral to certain projects. I guess I just don't feel like that's a insurmountable hurdle. Yeah, I'm okay with it.
I think it's good to have the flexibility. I mean, we had a situation with Todd Carpenter's roof where it caved in. He had no idea that was going to happen. We got around it because the city gave him the city's insurance settlement money, so it wasn't actually urban renewal money that went to repairing that. But I could see a situation with someone else having something happen during a storm or whatever, and if you don't repair that roof and make that building whole, then you threaten the businesses on the side, and basically that building is unusable. So I can see situations where we might want to consider it. Kristen?
How does that work for people that, I mean, I would think ideally these people should have insurance on their building, correct? Like, are they double dipping from this? Are they getting money from this group and then going and getting a settlement from their insurance when they claim that claim as well?
Well,
I
we've never
guess-
had anybody do that, so I don't know.
I
But I
guess-
also think what Todd did, I don't know. I don't have his
Oh, I'm
numbers,
not-
but I'm thinking,
Yeah.
no, I'm just saying, I think it costs more than just what the replacement to do what they wanted to do with it.
I guess I just question on like repairs in general. That's something that like, if I have to do that on my home, I then say, okay, well, I had to spend $30,000. I now have a $3,000 deductible that I have to pay and my insurance pays the rest. And maybe then my premium goes up. That's kind of a cost of doing business, in my opinion.
That's true.
But I do think that like it would make sense to leave it open, especially for new projects. I know like if I was installing a hood in a restaurant, that would obviously impact the roof. So things like that would be, in my opinion, great to come before, just agreeing in that respect.
Well, I think if your roof comes in, collapses because of heavy snow, that smells more like a insurance claim to me. But if you just haven't had the money to fix your roof for like Tony's, that doesn't sound like an insurance claim to me. But, you know, I understand if there's a building that isn't being maintenance right, it's going to contribute to blight. It's going to, you know, eventually become a worthless building like Tony's and have to be tore down.
Issues going on.
And that's, you know, not what you want to see. But if there's a fire, you're going to see some blight that you've never seen before. You can look at LA and see what I'm talking about, you know.
Doing the sprinklers alone is going to help a lot, probably far and away the biggest impact. But if we can have some flexibility on roofs, and I'm hearing the door is open to at least considering some, at least on DFAs, but okay. I'm still intrigued by the idea of, if acquired within 5 years, keeping that door open.
That's a good solution.
Gosh, no, yeah, okay. Let's proceed. Single-family residential, new category. And again, there are not a whole lot of structures that fall in this category that are within the urban renewal district, but there are some homes, particularly of historic value. We're providing some funding up to $25,000 with a 50% match. We increased that match requirement from the December presentation. Electrical and plumbing upgrades allowed, no fixtures. That's the same rule that applies with other buildings in town. No like-for-like replacements. Roof repair, here we go again. Yes or no on this one? Only if the cost does not exceed 50% of the larger project cost and must occur in conjunction with other renovation. Leave it in or take it out?
Maybe since you don't want those houses to fall in disrepair since they're in the downtown area, and what if it was that they pay a greater percent rather than the project having to be the roof part being 50%? See, that makes a really big project. So what if we agreed to help them with the roof, but we only gave them, I'm just throwing a number out there, a 25% match instead of a 50? I mean, we gave them 25, they put 50,
Mhm.
75 in.
They have a
Example.
75% match.
I don't know what it costs for a roof repair these days. The last time I did it was 5,000. It was a long time ago. So, because I just think if you tell someone, you know, say it's $10,000 for your roof, but you have to have a $20,000 project, maybe in a house, you don't need that. Maybe what you really need is the roof, and that's the main thing to save it and keep
Mhm.
it from falling into disrepair and blight. If we're going to do residential.
Josh, do you ever read on, I know you have a couple of homes in mind in the district. HVAC, I think, was more of an issue.
Yeah, I haven't talked to any property owners in the, residential property owners in the district. When this this residential upgrade program kind of came to our minds here, those have been for, upgrades from wall mounted heat systems to upgrading to mini splits. Also, I think recent conversations, conversion of, maybe basements into ADUs, which seemed like that's really on par with what the agency supports, increasing residential units downtown. Nothing to do with roofs at this point. But in the time that Dan and I have been talking about this one late last year, I think we've had 3, potentially 4 inquiries of some of our residential units downtown. 2 of them included taking basements and turning them into ADUs. So figure if there'd be an option, if there's the option available for the incentive program for commercial properties, then it seems like it might be a good option to provide that to residential properties as well.
Thoughts, feedback for staff? Roof in or out?
Well, I guess I would I don't fully understand why this is even part of us, a little bit. I mean, I kind of understand in terms of increasing housing, but it's like, seems like the focus of what we're trying to do is not a residential element. So if it was me, I would just like, this wouldn't be part of this program at all. I mean, I just don't understand why we're investing in residential units. Like, why don't we invest in residential units on the other side of the street that are outside the district? So it's like, this is more of a commercial, downtown kind of business thing. So that's just my general response to the whole kind of segment. And I'm not exactly sure where it came from. I mean, I'm sure people like, sure, yeah, we'd like to get some money to help, fix up our house or even put an ADU in, which is great, but I'm sure everybody in town would want that. So the fact that they're not in the district doesn't justify the fact that we're investing public dollars into that.
Yeah, I think, it initially started from a property that is it's a residential home zoned in the central business commercial district. So you can have one of those homes, you can either flop it, tomorrow they could turn it into an office if they wanted to. So it's really the residential homes that are in the districts are zoned central business commercial, so they have that flexibility. So
question, if one of those homeowners was going to sell their home or flip it to turn it into office space or something like that, it would change the use from residential to commercial though, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And then if it was commercial, it would, in my mind, fall under the guise of the urban renewal program, right? So, yeah, I don't know. When I saw that too, I kind of scratched my head on a little bit. Because if you're going to flip it and turn it into a commercial property, there's no reason you couldn't go to urban renewal and have a project plan.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Why we're bringing it up for discussion, getting this guidance, the interest has been out there looking for guidance as to whether we do it or not.
Yeah, if you're putting in, I guess I'd be more comfortable if we were talking about expanding housing, but just generic HVAC or roofing with no other nothing else that meets our bucket list of goals. To me, yeah, just because your house happens to lie within our box of, doesn't make sense to me. So I mean, if it meets our list of goals of things we're trying to accomplish, I guess that makes sense. But, so if you're adding housing, if you're going to add an ADU and you need help to, put in plumbing and a bathroom and heat, some sort of heating like that I can get there. That makes sense, but.
And then one thing to add to the discussion, would it still be considered that whether or not this is on the table or not, we could scratch this, would an individual who has a residential home in the district still be afforded $10,000 towards SDCs paid for in the event they were to add a residential into that building? Effectively single family home now, they create a duplex. Is that SDC standard going to apply to that as well?
Are you asking if somebody had a large enough lot that they could build a second
You could split a house.
home, you could split it and build another house?
Yeah, because some
Talking
of
about
those.
covering the SCC fees for that new development.
Yep. Yeah. So now you have an upstore, second floor residential along Second Street. You add a residential unit, it's $10,000 paid toward SDCs. If you happen to have a home on 4th Street, for example, you just happen to live in that home. It's been used as a residential use, but you want to add an ADU in the basement, let's say. Should that $10,000 apply just by adding it? Nothing else would be added to it. None of this single family residential upgrade in the event that that's not adopted. But it's still kind of the agency's goal over these past few years is increasing housing stock within our district. So would that $10,000 SDC payment still apply to one of those homes?
So SDC applies to ADUs and also if you put like a mother-in-law's quarters within your current home?
Yeah, it would be any dwelling, any increased dwelling, what the guidelines currently call out.
Sorry, just to can I clarify,
Yeah,
Darcy?
yes.
So if my square footage of my house remains the same and I'm just putting a divider wall down and calling it property A and property B, then you'd have to pay SDCs?
You would, yeah. Yep.
No, that's what I was clarifying too. So
Yeah.
I understood. Be on the same page. Okay.
Yeah, we have a few of them in this area. There's duplexes and triplexes along 4th Street. Some of them just used to be single family homes years and years ago. They've since been converted. So it would be that idea of adding, effectively increasing the amount of options downtown.
Personally, then I would be in favor of that because it increases housing and it takes a pretty big chunk off.
I would agree. And it's more people who are living downtown who are going to most likely be supporting downtown businesses.
That can all happen without these changes. The board feels that these new changes that we're proposing, they're not on board with that. We would still make sure that the SDCs could be applied.
There's this, I think, just sort of philosophical reluctance to be willing to give money to a project that many other people in town don't have access to. But that's sort of the nature of this particular district, right? If you are investing here and you fall under these categories, we're incentivizing that. And if we're good with that, then we need to, in my opinion, we need to be good with that. And if we are willing to allow second story housing units or projects that put in housing to be incentivized with SDC charges being covered, it feels like there's no reason to me not to do that, to allow SDC charges for other residential areas in the district. Yeah, it's something I wouldn't be able to get because I don't live in the district, but that's sort of the special nature of an incentivized program or incentive program.
Is that a concept for the next?
Yeah. And people living downtown, as Marcus points out, that's going to increase, all things being equal, that's going to increase the prosperity of downtown.
Sounds like we might reduce this section to SDCs.
Well, I think we just elaborate. I mean, I just looked at the guidelines. It doesn't specify whether or not those are applied to residential or commercial. I just kind of wanted to be clear on that. But it sounds the board seems a little lukewarm on this new program that this new grant that we would be requesting here, which is just for residential upgrades. And this could be for anything on the residential home to be upgraded, nothing to do with nothing to do with the SDCs. Am I kind of tracking that correctly?
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Well, I was just going to clarify because I just want to make sure it's clear, especially with after what Dan said. I just want to make sure we have a set of goals of things we're trying to accomplish, and one of those being, the addition of housing and getting people downtown. So if some of these single-family residential upgrades helps with that, then I think, in my mind, me personally, I think that's fine. But because and we kind of back to your check the boxes, if it can check 5 or 7 of those boxes off of the list of the goals we're trying to accomplish. But if it's in back to Dan's kind of comment of just because I happen to live in the box, yes, but we have lots of businesses live in a box, but they also need to, but we also kind of structure the places we spend our money, or not our money, the community's money, into things that meet those goals. So if we can find ways to meet those goals for those single family residences that now become multifamily residences, then maybe, am I making any sense? Then maybe that accomplishes some of what we're trying to get at in the single family.
Yeah, effectively all
section.
costs for this grant would have to go into the production of a new housing unit, something along those lines.
It's just a thought.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Long. The way that I read this is, so I think to Stacy's point, maybe it does actually specify like per new housing unit. So I think that's pretty clear. My question is, does staff have an example of if I took a 3,500 square foot home and I split it in half and turn it into a duplex or 2 units? Is there I don't remember the calculation for SDC fees for that. But because I've never looked into a residential unit, but would it really would it be more than $10,000 in, could it ever be?
Yeah, so if you're adding a brand new single family home, and that is effectively what you would be doing. So there's a little bit of a break between an ADU and a duplex. So duplexes, what we require is that duplexes are provided with brand new utilities all the way through and those costs. With an ADU, you can tap into the existing water line. Yeah, so there's a little bit of a savings when it comes to an ADU. And I think I was speaking with an individual today. In addition to the parks SDCs, I think they're about $6,700 this year. You tack that onto the others. I think we're looking at about $16,000 for a new dwelling to be built. And I could be a little off on those numbers, but it seems to be about right. Yep.
And again, that's for a new residential building, though.
Yeah, but it would be the same if it's a single family home and you're just adding another dwelling to create it into a duplex, you'd still be tacking on that 16,000. And really what it is, and the program's designed the SDC, we cover actual SDC costs. So that's something as we look back to the Basalt Commons project. Basalt Commons project was, 116 units, but we base it off of the actual cost, and that's associated with, the size of the water pipe and things like that. When you start doing multifamily, the more units, you start to see a slow reduction of, it's not a 1-for-1 at that point, the more units that you add. So it does help. I mean, it does help. The agency is providing a pretty good investment to add dwelling units into the district.
Mhm.
So the next component is SDC payments. We just talked about that. Going on to development funding agreements. Here we get into, and we have the question posed in the narrative. At what point is a DFA project large enough to justify staff time required versus the smaller, more manageable projects through the incentive program? And we don't have a clear threshold. Over 200,000, we know we're talking that, but there's a big gap between a $200,000 project and a $29 million project. Where in that middle does this kick in? And we're not trying to propose an absolute thing. I think it's probably going to be on a case by case basis. We're not going to be flooded, maybe, with these, but we certainly anticipate at least 2 or 3 in very recent conversations. So it could well occur. To try to winnow it down a little bit, we're proposing the idea of a non-refundable administrative fee of $1,000 to consider an application, non-refundable. So again, to Josh's earlier point of having some skin in the game, we want to be sure that someone is serious enough to go to the work, to have the pro forma, to do the financials, to have a loan portfolio that we can examine, all of that type of thing. The award could take the form of a grant or a loan or a combination of both. And here again, we don't do loans right now. We used to. What we're proposing here, and I talk about a little bit farther down on the page, is that we keep the door open to loans. Right now, that door is closed. And going back to the point of having a maximum impact from the resources that we have in the limited time we have available, we need flexibility. And we need to be able to put more money into larger projects. And loans would be a way to do it if we, of course, do the due diligence that goes along with those. So in addition, on DFAs, project must create at least 5 permanent family wage jobs as documented, and there's a process for this in the enterprise zone. If you create a job, it needs to be a permanent job, and you have to report the job. It's tracked. The application must be accompanied by an operational pro forma demonstrating sustainability over at least 5 years. Agency investment must not exceed 10% of total project value. Throwing that percentage in for the sake of argument. I don't know if that's right or not. Should it be higher? Should it be lower? Keeping Basalt Commons in mind, $29 million project, we're putting 1.7 into it, combined SDCs and DFA. SDC offsets would still apply, up to 10,000 per new residential unit. Of course, all of this subject to board approval. That final point, then we go back into the ROIs. And again, the challenge of trying to figure that out. But here we are talking about larger projects. Again, not to borrow complication, but we have a $500,000 project. We have a $1.5 million project, or 2.5. Those are falling into that uncertain category. They're higher than 200,000, but they're a lot less than a 29 million. So we anticipate bringing them forward. We'll see how many we have. There are going to be at least a few. As we start promoting the fact that these resources are available, that the district is going to terminate in 2029, that window is going to be closing, and it takes years to get a project off the ground. So we anticipate a lot of activity within the next 1 to 2 to 3 years as that window starts to close. So thoughts on those points so far on DFAs and also on the loan question down below. The KED would administer. They had some role apparently in the Sunshine Mill. I don't recall that, but I'm told that, and I haven't tried to research through the minutes yet on that one. I don't know if anybody remembers that or not. But talking just briefly with Jessica from the KED today, their fee $75 an hour. By comparison, Mount Hood Economic Alliance, they manage loan portfolio for the alliance. There's about 5 to 7 loans. Costs about $23,000 a year for loan management. The Alliance has about 900,000 available for loans. And that is another loan resource out there, of course, along with McKed. But we would be adding one more resource via our own loan capacity. I do talk about timely completion on here. This is something we do not have in DFA right now, but putting a deadline in there so that we do have a CO, and also having some sort of a financial penalty if a project does not meet that deadline. Liquidated damages being a term that the port uses for their projects. I have that from Andrea. Recipients provide a financial guarantee of performance in the form of a liquidated damages clause. The amount and time frame to be negotiated in the agreement. A lot of all of this is subject to negotiation in the agreement. We don't want to try to come up with a whole bunch of rules right now that are simply too restrictive.
So even though it's subject to negotiation, like what are you envisioning? Because I can think of pretty much almost every single project we've had in the last couple of years. There's been delays that were not through the fault of the person who had requested it, and we did extensions, we did amendments to their agreements. So at what point would there be a penalty?
I think we have to keep some sort of discretion involved, but I don't know if you do an extension, another one, at some point that funding is just tied up in perpetuity. So to have a little bit more of a stick built into it, yeah, give ourselves some flexibility if there is just cause, but have a little bit more ability to enforce the funding that we have committed and to make sure that that does happen on some reasonable time frame. I guess I'm giving you a wishy-washy answer because I don't want to come up with something that's going to be set in
Well,
concrete.
yeah,
but-
I mean, we've experienced that, and we've also experienced this board putting Sunshine Mill in default, actually, on a loan when they were trying to get another loan to buy us out. And so it's one of the reasons we didn't want to continue to do loans, and also we're so close to the end of the agents or of the district that I worry about that it's complicated, or if, like I said, almost everybody has had to ask for an extension, and it wasn't because they weren't doing anything. I mean, the only thing Tokala sat on their property, the Tony's site, and did nothing. That would have been a good one to have a stick. But if you say it has to have at least 5 permanent wage jobs, I could think of projects that wouldn't necessarily, residential, for example, wouldn't create 5 jobs, or someone creates 5 jobs, then we go into recession again and we lose them. What's the penalty over that? I mean, we have people in the economic zone that they failed to meet that, but I don't think there was any actual penalty for it. Was there a penalty? Or you're like nodding? Okay. Okay. Well, it just never came back to city council like we talked about. Yeah. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, I don't have any understanding why we get involved in loans at this point. I mean, we're almost to the end. You put I mean, think about this. You get a project, $1 million project, 2 million. You put millions of dollars out there. Like, what would be the point of that? I mean, they need to figure out how they can use our funding to get the package for everything else to do the project. But it's like, I don't think we want to get involved in loans at this stage of this board. That's my opinion. It doesn't seem to make any, I mean, maybe you can tell me why it would make sense, but to me, it makes no sense.
Well, we have a potential project, and if we allowed loans, that project would go forward almost immediately.
What is it? Would be like a loan that we do a 20-year amortization and they pay us back over 20 years? So
10 years.
Where would the money go?
10 years, it would be paid back. Good question. Upon the dissolution of the district, it would go to the city. If the agency were to continue, we could fold it back into an RLF of our own and keep that going under a different district. This could be a long-term mechanism.
But we're not a long-term organization.
The district is not, but if the agency were continue and look at forming a new district someplace else in the city, then it could be another tool.
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't see that as what we're trying to do is get in. I mean, there's a lot of loan programs out there and loan agencies to do that. I don't know that we need more loan agencies to put more money into loan, revolving loan funds or something.
Are they not eligible for a conventional loan?
Some can be. Another way that we've done it is a loan buy-down program.
Yeah, buy downs.
And I think we have done that in the past on, was it Gare or Honnold, I believe? Gare building.
That's essentially a grant, right? I mean, we're buying down the loan by paying it up front. So it's essentially a grant.
Yeah, they have a commercial loan and we grant them the difference between what's affordable and what isn't.
Dan, could you explain to me how we would be operating a loan program that was different than McKed's? Are they not already sort of the lender of last resort?
They would be managing the loan program, our loan basically that we would issue. They would take on the management of that. So it would be an addition to the RLF that they have now. And, the business that I have in mind would have a package, and this would be one part of the package. We would be able to offer it a more attractive rate lending to make the difference for that project.
One thing that makes me really reluctant, in addition to the things that Commissioner Hagee's already brought up, which are substantial, is just tying up the money that we may well decide we want on hand in the next few years, whether it's because of First Street or other opportunities. And given that we don't have a very long horizon guaranteed, I'm personally a little reluctant to take on long-term responsibilities.
If we have the flexibility on DFAs to put more money into projects, then that's fine. What we're trying to do with all this is trying to look for ways to have maximum impact with the resources we know we have between now and 2029.
And I think you're fading out a little bit for the recording.
I'm sorry?
Speak up.
I'm guilty of what I accuse you of doing, not speaking up loud enough. Sorry about that. With my hearing aids, it sounds like I'm shouting to myself, so it's deceptive.
And how much did you say you thought the administration was going to cost if McKed did it? 26,000?
They do $75 an hour. They charge an hourly fee for this. And so the example I pointed out was the Mount Hood Economic Alliance for about 5 to 7 loans. It's about $23,000 a year in fees. I'm not wedded to this thing. I wanted to throw it out there. We're throwing out a lot of ideas by you for reality checks right now. But just keeping the conversations we've had with businesses over the past year and a half, you're too limited, you're not doing enough, the impact isn't big enough. So how do we address those points? And maybe we're doing that by some of the other changes that you're supporting so far. And I think opening the door to more DFAs. Sprinklers is big. If we could do sprinklers, that's going to help a lot right there. So.
Well, Walt convinced me about sprinklers, so I'll give him that.
I showed up for a reason.
Let's get good feedback, Walt. Goodness. Yes, Kristen.
I agree with all the points here, but I also wanted to mention that I think as we do wrap up this agency, it's really important to consider the legacy we want to leave. And so I think that as we consider loans, that is a very divisive topic. I recall moving into town and hearing some of the drama about the Sunshine Mill, and I would prefer not having my name like permanently attached to something like that at the end of this agency too, personally.
All righty. Good point. Continuing. Josh,
I would just maybe get a gut check, and it's not something we added in here about the DFAs. Is there a price, a total cost that the agency wants to cap on development funding agreements? We had one with, the Salt Commons. The DFA was, $750,000. Just wanting to check to see if that's something that the agency wants to consider. We did have a list of quite a few projects in our area, and Dan and I were actually on the phone with someone today about another project that wasn't included on that list. So we do know that this is really going to, now that we've increased the MI, there is going to be interest out there. And it's that level of maybe how many projects do you want to spread this money out to, or do you want there to be a limit to how much you can put onto, or do you want to put most of the money over the next few years into one larger project? So that might be something that would help us out. And I don't know, that could also just be on a case by case basis made by the agency. We don't have to put a number on it, but we threw around the 750,000 to be comparable to the Basalt Commons. And just kind of wanted to, even though we didn't include it in here, seeing if there's any appetite for some type of cap on these types of agreements.
Marcus, then Ben.
A question, is that 750K for the DFA for Basalt? Is that the largest that we've ever awarded?
I can't speak for anything that came before my time here, but yes, as far as, in the time that I've been here.
For the I guess for the total amount, we increased MI significantly, but part of the reason we did that was in order to so that we could facilitate the First Street project. So I think the thing that I'm like struggling with is how much of a cap to put on it, like you're asking, but I guess there's two questions. One, like, we're really not going to end up with that much money if First Street isn't like de-scoped or whatever. Like, it's going to take a significant amount of the money that we bring in from the increase in MI. My other question is, was there? I recall there was, I don't remember if it was under the DFA for Basalt Commons, but there was a state like a statute that limited the amount of money that could go.
Probably talking about Boley prevailing wage.
Yeah.
That's the 750.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you go into federal prevailing wage requirements above 750.
So it's not to say that we couldn't. It's on that developer, ultimately what it comes down to. And it's really going to have a significant impact on your project as a whole. So.
Well, even with our increase in MI, I think we're right. There wasn't a lot of money for other projects, and we were looking at smaller things downtown helping local business owners as a focus, right? I mean,
Did a fast calculation. You're about 5 million after First Street in rough numbers would be available.
without the city chipping in anything on First Street? What number are we using for First Street? Let's do First Street.
7 million for First Street.
Total of 7 on First Street, but I'm thinking of the 3.8 that's already been set aside, so that's 3.2. And our existing capacity of 2.2 plus 6.1 through the substantial amendment gives us around just over 8. So 3.2 off of 8. Bearing in mind that my math is not very good, so.
4 point.
Okay. To that point, though, the conversation that Josh and I were having with, and this is a new one, we learned of it just within the past week. It could be a big impact project and probably a fairly expensive project, and details to come, possibly in February.
So we have 5 million in an incentive program we want to put some money into and see some projects done. I would be inclined to be in the position to support another larger project, a DFA scale project, but with real clear guidelines. And I know that's what you're asking. I'm repeating that question. Yeah, what are we willing to spend on DFAs so that we can have a large incentive fund left over?
Do you want to cap at 750 or not, or do you want to leave flexibility beyond 750? Right.
The whole reason for the 750 was the prevailing wage issue. And if a project, I mean, if they want to pay prevailing wage, I mean, they're going to spend another 20% on labor more, for nothing, in my opinion, except that they fall into a category that requires them to, because of the funding they get from us, it requires them to pay a lot more in wages that would not otherwise be necessary. So I don't know. I mean, if they want to do that and maybe it makes sense, I guess they can make that argument, but it doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense for Tokala. That's what I always heard the project, why, didn't happen. So why would another project want to get more money from us to spend a bunch more money on labor and have a bunch of government regulations overlaying the project? That would drive me crazy, but
That's what drove the 750.
That's part of the reason that we do some of the things we do, though, is because it doesn't count toward the
right.
prevailing wage calculation.
Exactly.
So we could give them more than 750,000, but depending on how we did it and how it was structured, it might not bump them into prevailing wage.
Yeah,
SDCs.
exactly. What's that?
SDCs wouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's like the total package for basalt is 1.7 or something like that, and it's but they only got 750 under some category that apparently doesn't bump them into that. And that number could move, right? It could move that number up to 750. They could move 750 up, but I don't know if they will. But if they did, that could make a difference. I don't really care. I don't want to give somebody 800,000 and have them spend another 175,000 on labor because we gave them another 50 grand. I mean, that would be like, what are you doing? Why would you want to do that? There's no benefit.
I think you could just leave it open and let the board decide on a case by case.
We'll go with that. Thank you.
I personally wouldn't want to go above like 750 or $1 million for a really big project, just because that'd be a fifth of our discretionary funding, or $5 million, which represents like 25 incentive projects potentially. So if we were to, put $1 million to a large project, that's a great, potentially a large impact, but we've also taken 5 smaller incentive projects off the table. And we've always tried to do both things, both big impact and support small, local, homegrown business and investors. And I still want to do both. So I'd be personally not want to spend more than the 750 on a big project.
Okay, please stay on the board then.
I too am concerned about the First Street project. I anticipate the cost is going to be a lot higher than what we think. And I've just been kind of waiting for some news that, oh my God, we found this problem. Now the river trail thing that goes kind of near Safeway, we feel that's all paid for. There's not going to be a cost overrun on that somehow.
There's no additional contribution from the agency on that.
So it could just maybe not happen because materials cost a lot more.
That's a Parks and Recreation project.
Yeah, that'd be a parks with the agency contributed 290,000 toward it, which assisted in a grant on that.
There's no way that Urban Renewal is going to pitch in more money for that.
Not unless the pitch is made by the Parks District at a future date and an agreement established.
I mean, just everything's going to cost more than when we allocated the money. The First Street thing, I just don't think we have any idea what that's going to cost, honestly. I don't know how we could. I'm not criticizing anybody for not knowing that. So, some of the concerns about, well, this sunsets eventually. We can't have a bunch of projects that there's no money for. And, hopefully we can spend some money on a lot of the businesses and help the urban rural district. And if we spend a lot of money on sprinklers, fire suppression, that's less money for a big project. So it's just the timeline and stuff. It has me concerned. I haven't heard their idea on the business and everything, but in a way, it doesn't really matter. You know, we just can't. And personally, I hope there isn't another urban renewal district created down the road. And you know why? I've expressed that before. So I know it's possible that could happen, but I'm not in favor of it.
I think we probably have enough direction from this. We'll come back in February.
Okay.
Take what we've heard and come up with another round on this and see if we can nail it down.
So if Jill's going to bring some things back for us in February, then are we planning to wait and vote on this in March? Just have more discussion in February? Or are we going to try to vote on it in February?
Love to have a decision in February so that we can have some guidance on these projects.
Okay.
Commissioner Hagee, you were.
I had another question. I'm sorry, we kind of passed over, but back to it's actually page 9 of 22 in the, so it has to do, and we've talked about this before a couple times actually, but it says increasing the grant, this is where you're combining them, but increasing the grant limit to 200,000 with 30% match. And so I've asked the question several times, like, to me, it's like, are you saying that the person getting the grant only has to bring 30% and we pay for 70%?
That is how we have it now for the
Okay.
commercial grant.
Okay, because I've said several
Is that not
times,
right?
it's like, that does not make any sense to me. If a project cannot come with more than 30% of the project, why are we, I mean, it's like, if, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like they should have at least 50%. That's what we provide, that's the minimum we provide. Now we're saying, well, we'll pay for 70% of your project. That doesn't make any sense to me. That I question the viability of a project if they can't come up with at least half of it. If I go somewhere and somebody gives me half of a project, it's like I'm like through the roof. I mean, I think half is too much, honestly. It makes our money go a short amount of ways, I mean, the people that get 70% funding, great for them, but.
Well, this is a good time to be asking the question because.
Okay, but I've had this discussion several times and I've been confused about when you say 30% match, is that our 30%, we're providing 30%, or, they're providing 30%?
And
okay, because last time we had the discussion, I had brought this up and it was like, oh yeah, I guess we're confused. We're providing 30%.
well, I think we were talking about residential and we upped it to 50 on residential, but on this one, yeah, there's room for confusion. That's one reason we wanted to merge these things. Commercial grants is a 50% match right now, the way it is. And mixed use is a 30% on 150,000. So we're combining to 200. So now is a time when let's mail it. We've been carrying that 30% over into this discussion, the 30% that was attached to mixed use. But if we want to change that, now it's the time to do it. And there's probably confusion on my part too, because we're dealing with two different numbers there. Commercial was 50%, mixed use was 30%. Now we're combining them. So what should carry forward, 30% or 50%, or something else entirely?
Well,
Give a
what we're
number.
saying here is if someone
75%.
came to us for $200,000, they'd have to come up with 60,000.
Yeah.
That's 30%.
Yeah, so the guidelines read for mixed use projects, 30% matching grant funds required. So, yep, we would be contributing 70%. So in combining the two, yeah, you're looking at a 30% and a 50%. So this may be that opportunity to change that number.
With 60-40, we come up with 40 and they come up with 60?
Well, I mean, it's up to the restaurant, but to me, and I don't know what world that that program exists, but that's not reality. I mean, nobody provides 70% funding. I don't think. I mean, that's just.
We have been.
Well, even if
yeah.
we have, it doesn't make any sense,
Well, now's the time to change it. Do we
Yeah.
want to change it?
Well, it's up to them. I just don't think that's a reasonable. I think that's an unreasonable expectation that the public is going to pay for 70% of their project.
You're one of them there, Commissioner. What number would you feel is right? I agree with you. I think 70% is on our end is too rich, too much. That said, what might be a more feasible number?
and I don't know, but I mean, I've said in the past, but I mean, 50% would be a rich program in my opinion.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, 60-40 would make more sense to me as a business person. I mean, if you can go somewhere and get, you know,
40%. Yeah. Yeah.
you can't get that anywhere.
I'm not
you know?
arguing with you. I'm not arguing with you at all.
I mean, if it were me, I mean, I own a small business downtown, and I think that if I can go to the bank and get a loan and have like a 40 or 50% down payment on my loan, that's going to like tip the scales in my favor. For like a $200,000 loan or even a $50,000 loan for a project. But I guess my question is, because I don't necessarily agree or disagree that a 30% match when we combine the two is low, but we're taking we're taking commercial grants with a 50% match, taking a mixed use with a 30% match. My understanding, and maybe this is uh, not completely correct, but my understanding for the way that that was set up before, mixed use was with the trying to entice or incentivize downtown business owners to like
Housing.
to produce housing on the second floors. And I think if we take that away from people, we need to consider the impact of that. We can't get them to do that now. I question whether or not it's just, you know, we need to make them more aware of it. I don't recall what we've done in the past to advertise that to the building owners downtown in the district, but could be counter to producing the vertical residential like upstairs units that we've all talked about downtown, at least.
We would continue to offer the SGCs as an incentive for that.
I'm always wary to give staff more work, but I'm kind of curious if you have top of your head or in the future ideas of projects that did only meet that 30% mixed use projects in the past. Like, are there successful projects that turned out well, but only provided that?
I'm not familiar with. I know we had one that fell through about a year ago, but no, not recently. Or
Yeah, I can't honestly think of a mixed use project that we have approved yet. Well, there has been one, but it was withdrawn after we approved it. Other than that, yeah, we haven't really.
So most of these projects are actually bringing more than the 30% anyway. So.
Well, it's just that haven't been any classified under this mixed use process. Yeah.
Well, and the thing, I mean, maybe it makes sense to incentivize that, but I'm saying, why would we incentivize everything at 70%? That makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's why I don't know. In my mind, I think that leaving them separate, even though it does potentially create more work for staff, I think is probably still appropriate.
Yeah, and the thought for combining, and it's a good point. The thought for combining was the 50,000. You know, Dan, you know, working around with individuals in the district. 50,000 we were hearing wasn't enough to move some of these projects. $50,000. So by combining it and saying that a commercial project downtown can go up to 200,000, that's why we thought this idea of combining it. But you're right. I mean, the point of that mixed use was to incentivize housing. So could there be more of a carve out for it? Because yeah, one thing we heard, I mean, the majority of what we have down in our district is they're commercial uses. They're commercial uses, and the obstacle, we're providing some assistance with incentivizing housing. What we hear more and more is, I mean, it's difficult to add residential units to our old buildings and meet current building code. It's a difficult obstacle that we face in our having such old buildings that we do.
But maybe something to flip it on its head, maybe the right answer is to increase the commercial grant threshold from 50,000 to some new number and reduce mixed use so that we're reducing our, increasing the commercial grants that we can approve and whatnot. But
what if we went with 200 cap, keep them combined, but a 60-40 split on commercial alone and a 50-50 split if there's housing involved.
I like that. It's still rich, but it's a lot more reasonable. Agree. Oh.
SDCs still kick in.
I think it's good.
Go with that.
Better.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I'll take it. I appreciate everybody's patience. It's good feedback.
Great discussion.
It's good
Really
feedback.
appreciate it.
I think our job here tonight is done. Any outstanding questions? We'll come back in February and see if we can have a decision. And if not, we'll come back in March. We'll give it a try. Okay.
Does that feel actionable to you guys? Do you feel like you can take this and roll with it and
Well,
apply this?
I would like to learn a little bit more from our county assessor on the ROI topic. We could bring something in front of you, but I just have if we don't flush that out, I think it would be a little too soon to adopt a standard for ROI. So maybe we do push that to March.
Yeah.
And Jill, we can have a presentation from you or however you want to put it together for the next meeting. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Side conversation.
There's a couple of things I can think of that might be helpful. So I'm thinking I can test that out on YouTube maybe in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
Ken Richardson.
Chair, I might have misread the room. It's happened before, once or twice. But I guess I got the sense from a number of people up here that we were more or less convinced that ROI was not something we necessarily needed to pursue, that it was too unwieldy for us, and that maybe we could let that go. Did I miss that?
Casey.
Well, while yes, I think I would agree with you, I do think it would be helpful if I might be helpful to have in the back of our pocket just kind of a general understanding of these kind of things.
Sure.
Might be, because I think we were kind of always under the, hey, we're adding value to this building, so the property taxes are going to go up. This is great. And if maybe that's not always the case, but if we can understand a little bit better when that might or may not be the case, if that's what I think, understanding you might be able to help us glean some of those ideas from, even though maybe it's not ROI, at least it might be a little more clarity.
Well, I think too, the distinction between smaller projects and large
Larger,
DFAs.
yeah, yep.
I think where the ROI complexity might be worth the discussion, certainly if we're talking about a $1 million, $2 million, $3 million project, how does that play out? Basalt Commons being case in point.
And I think you were right on. It was sometimes clarify the ROI or to get a better understanding. It's been some years.
Chair Long.
Yes.
Hi, I'm sorry. I can't hear if somebody's speaking right now, and it seems like somebody might be.
Oh.
I didn't.
Maybe it just died.
Thank you, Jonathan. We'll get a different one.
Yeah, you bet.
How about that? Better? Again, it wasn't so much to clarify ROI more than to provide sort of a programmatic understanding of how it works. I've done it years and years ago, totally different board. So that was the brief conversation Commissioner Hagee and I had, as well as maybe it's time for that again. So I'll try and just give a brief, again, summary overview of exception events, real market value increases versus taxable increases, and how that works, because there's a few amendments I'd like to make with some algorithms in your document as well, and sort of how things work. You know, try and keep it brief and high level. So I won't be up here an hour, I promise. But I think that would be helpful.
Be valuable. I appreciate you putting that work in, and I think it also helps the public understand later. Okay. Any other board member comments or questions?
Two quick things. I think at least 4 of us are on the Federal Street Ad hoc Federal Street Plaza Committee, but I'm trying to use every public meeting I'm in to give updates on that and spread the word. We have some design schemes boiled down, thanks to a bunch of initial public input from 400 folks on the Tony's lot, which we use to kind of get started. Those design schemes are online. You can go online, review them. Please submit your feedback. I believe there's also going to be an open house on February 12th at Freebridge Brewing at 5:30. So community interactive open house. And then we're also going to display those at a bunch of different local businesses downtown. So just encourage folks to check those out and provide feedback on them. And then the second thing, I just wanted to update folks that on Saturday, we celebrated the grand opening of the new treetop playground structure North Wasco Parks and Recreation District did up at Cirrhosis Park. 250, 300 people there. Lots of kids very excited for the new playground. If you haven't seen it, definitely go take a look. Lots of cool new features, very interactive, more ADA accessible. And I just wanted to, again, on the record, thank the city. I know it's not Urban Renewal, but thank the city. They made a significant contribution to the cirrhosis restoration of $400,000, as did the county. So thank you very much. And then next for us is phase 2, which is going to be some more swings, benches, shade structure, batting cage, all kinds of upgrades, food truck spot if you have a party there. So really cool things happening in our parks, and really appreciate the collaboration with the city and the county on that. And that's all I have.
Kristen.
Sorry, with that, I was wondering if we have a timeline on when we'll be able to see what might go into the Tony's lot. I know that has been kind of a question for our Federal Street Plaza Committee as we do consider designs, and we're hoping to have that wrapped up in the next month or two. And so I'm not sure where that process is kind of at, and I would love to know when we might have an idea of what will go there, or even a couple of options.
So on the Tonys, we issued the request for expressions of interest, I think back in October, November.
I can barely hear you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, boy. Sorry about that. On Tonys, we issued a request for expressions of interest this past fall. We will be interviewing 3 proposals on the 31st, and on the 1st, I think it was on the 4th of February, I believe, is one of the interviews. Very different, but we hope to have good information coming out of those interviews. In the meantime, we had posed a series of written questions to each one of the respondents, and we're awaiting again those interviews to see what that. We didn't want to catch them off guard with some of the questions. Thought it fair to provide those in advance, but then have additional discussions at that point. Perhaps a discussion, a decision February. March, we'll need to conduct due diligence. We understand the importance of trying to get that nailed down. Again, they are quite different, and there are, well, I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I think we'd like to have a discussion in February, so hopefully we can wrap up on these interviews and get something in front of the board, some kind of discussion or update, a more thorough update in February.
Follow up to that, would it be possible for them to be provided the information from the Federal Street Plaza to possibly opine which scheme might work best for them as well, if they were to be in that spot? I know that some of the issues that we've come up against is knowing how much of that frontage area on the Tony's lot to actually allocate for that business if they want to have an entrance there. And so that would be really helpful for our committee to be able to do the best work we can too. And then I had one other question, but I can't remember what it was. Sorry.
Well, what was come back around to you? Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
It's gone.
Still gone. Okay. Well, we tried.
Thank you.
All right, staff comments and project updates.
That would have been the only update for me is on the Tony's side, and I just gave it. So
No,
thank
no,
you.
no. We buried the lead. You are retiring.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that. I will be retiring at the end of March. It has been a delight, and I want to emphasize I'm not going to fall off the face of the planet. I do want to stay engaged in this community. I raised my kids here. I love this town, and I'm just got a lot of brush to clear up white salmon. So I'll be around.
Josh, anything?
it. That's
Nothing?
it. Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, then at 7:27, and I declare this meeting adjourned.